I call this meeting of Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dombrowski.
Here.
Mr. Hinshaw.
Here.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Here.
Mr. Lefevre.
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mrs. Burke.
Here, please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening and welcome. We'll begin tonight's meeting with recognitions. Dr. Cates.
Certainly welcome to everyone who had the opportunity to join us this evening. We're glad to have you with us. Every high school student who prepares for college is aware of the emphasis placed on standardized college entrance exams, including the American College Test, or the ACT as it is called. The highest possible composite score a student can earn on the ACT is a 36. Statistically, less than 0.1% of the students who take the ACT achieve the highest score. Tonight we recognize 4 students from William Fremd High School who have achieved this remarkable accomplishment. 20 years ago, we began tracking students who have achieved a score of 36 on the ACT, and with the addition of these 4 students, we now have 119 students who have accomplished this outstanding achievement. On behalf of the Board of Education and High School District 211, I would like to congratulate our 4 students. We have a certificate for each of the students that the board president, Mrs. Burke, will present in just a moment. Our students will each be introduced by a sponsor whom they have selected. Sponsors, please follow this order. First, English teacher, Teresa Christensen, followed by world language teacher, John Snyder, science teacher, Julie Zinger, and then mathematics teacher, Chris Gratoni. Teresa?
I am proud and honored to introduce Ayushi Balan, here with her mother Meenakshi tonight and her sister Kashish. I have never truly worked with a more hardworking, passionate individual than Ayushi. I recall, for instance, one essay that Ayushi wrote for our AP Language and Composition course, in which she took an already complex issue in the medical field and purposely argued against her own viewpoint to challenge herself and to be more empathetic and understanding of all viewpoints. Later, she turned that essay into a TED Talk to further share her findings and her studies. But that's who Ayushi is. She's not afraid to take that extra step to make a positive impact. Ayushi's impact at school is very impressive, and her leadership roles are numerous and include, but not limited to, currently she's our co-president of Student Council. She is news editor of the Viking Log, our school newspaper. She's executive board member on a Model United Nations. She is a member of HOSA, Future Professionals Organization, in which she recently received national recognition for her work in instituting a brand new awareness, a few awareness activities actually for our school and for the community, for awareness for cardiovascular disease. So Ayushi is that person who truly turns her passion into action, and her perfect score on the ACT attests to is one of her many, many achievements that attest to her hard work and dedication. And I am sincerely honored to be here to publicly recognize her tonight. So congratulations, Ayushi.
And I am proud to introduce to you tonight Stella Chung with her parents tonight, Jaime and Wu Xin. Last year I had the pleasure of having Stella in my Spanish class. Every day she would come very well prepared, eager and thrilled to learn new concepts of vocabulary and grammar and apply them very quickly like no other student, being a source of inspiration for the other freshmen and the upperclassmen as well. It became very apparent when we'd play board games that Stella was the person to beat. One of our favorites was Hangman, and without any letters on the board of like a 10-word sentence, she would solve it in Spanish, okay, because of what we had talked about the day before. This year, she's moved on to a different Spanish teacher, but I still have the great opportunity of working with her now as she's decided to use her diverse depth of knowledge at Scholastic Bowl. And being an assistant Scholastic Bowl coach, I can see that she's already going to have a great, promising year. And as well as last year, she was in Model UN and math team and band. Unless that you think that she's all brains and intellect as well, watch out because she has a double degree black belt in Taekwondo. So, congratulations y felicitaciones a mi alumna querida Stella.
Good evening. I am pleased to present to the board one of my AP chemistry students, Christina Hu. If Christina's parents are here, if you want to just stand and be recognized, thank you for coming tonight. Congratulations, Christina. I am also honored to present Christina. She is an exemplary student academically and shows leadership qualities in all she does in the classroom environment. Christina has challenged herself by taking upper-level math and science classes during her 4 years at Fremd. She has consistently earned high achievement. Christina's teachers have remarked that she is a hard worker, going above and beyond expectations in the classroom, and has been kind and helpful to other students while working on projects, especially in computer science classes. This field of study seems to be Christina's forte. Christina has shown her ability to research and learn new skills through mobile app development. She works well with her peers and also on her own and prides herself in creating high-quality projects when she is done. In AP Chemistry class, which I've only known Christina for 6 weeks, right? But she has also shown me that she's incredibly ambitious, incredibly self-driven. She consistently asks good questions on a one-to-one basis and also in the classroom so that she's helping out her peers. She's careful in her lab work, and she's written like the best lab reports that I've seen in a long time. Very, very good. I wish Christina all of the best as she continues to work towards high achievement and during her senior year here at Fremd. Congratulations.
It is an honor for me to introduce Nipun Velupalli to the District 211 Board of Education for scoring a 36 on the ACT. Nipun is joined this evening by his mother, Lavunya. Thank you very much for your supporting and encouraging Nipun. I have been Nipun's math teacher and math team coach for the past 3 years, but I've actually known about Nipun since he was an 8th grader. I remember when the math department chair at Fremd received a phone call and then later asked me if a student can take multivariable calculus as a freshman. My response was, well, I guess theoretically yes, but in practice it's probably impossible. If you're going to meet the prereq, you'd have to do a self-study in AP Calc BC as an 8th grader, and then you'd have to go ahead and get a 5 on the BC exam. Nipun did a self-study in AP Calculus BC and got a 5 on the exam. At Fremd, Nipun has been extremely successful in multivariable calculus, linear algebra, and now differential equations. And with his leadership and resolve, Nipun has been an anchor of Fremd's math team. He's a member of the team's executive board, and he's shown time and time again that he's someone who the coaches and his teammates can depend on. Nipun has helped our math team reach its highest level of success ever. Nipun is also a gifted problem solver and a hard worker, but he is also genuine, kind, and a personable young man, and he serves as a great role model for his teammates. Napoon, I'm very proud of you for scoring a 36 on the ACT, but I'm even more proud to know that this is just one of the many successes and achievements that you're going to earn during your time at Fremd High School and beyond. Congratulations.
Congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education. We will take a 5-minute recess to allow for parent photographs, and then we'll resume our business portion. Okay, we will begin our business portion of the meeting. We'll begin it with citizens appearances and presentations. Is there anyone in the audience who did not have the opportunity to sign the yellow sheet to address the Board of Education on... Okay, I don't see any. We have one person, Mr. Artman. Welcome. If you could please state your name, and if you'd like a phone call from the superintendent, to please leave your number with Mr. Kovac.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Cates, Principal Little, Ms. Napier. My name is Dan Artman, and I am a parent of a senior at Schaumburg High School who participates on the POMS and competitive dance squad. I also am a parent of a Schaumburg High School graduate who graduated in 2016. I'm here on behalf of the parents, some of whom are in the audience with us tonight, from the Schaumburg POMS and dance squad in regards to concerns that we have as parents regarding the safety and space concerns regarding the practice area for our girls at Schaumburg High School. I know that you have received a letter that Ms. Rooney, one of our parents, had sent along, so I will not go through and read the letter onto the record here or take your time doing so. I just want to highlight a few things and then explain to you what it is we are asking for your help in solving this issue as we see it for our daughters. Essentially, in 2016, our girls were in a dance room that was long-standing and well-suited for the purposes of the dance team. It was a sprung floor, it had mirrors, it had ballet bars, all the things that you would need in a dance, for a dance team. The girls were moved out of that room into a smaller room near the back of the school, which still has mostly a sprung floor, and it does have mirrors, but it does not have the ballet bars. As you might expect, the ballet bars are important to allow the girls to work on their proper technique, stretch, etc. More importantly, because they are a competitive dance team, which has competed at state, which is recently as this year competed at a national competition, we need space. The girls need space that is large enough to appropriately work on their routines. They're large routines that move. There are over 20 girls on the squad, and as a result, the dance room that they were moved into was too small for that purpose. So we tried to find some alternatives and worked with the school and worked with Dr. Cates to try to find some alternatives, because one of the things that would happen is when we would ask the school to allow us to get onto the gym floor. And when the schedules for the gym floor would come out every year, we were nowhere to be found. We understand that the gym is a very desired area, and there are lots of activities and sports that need to use the gym floor, but it would seem like we would always have to remind them, hello, the POM squad, the dance team is here. Can you please remember to put us somewhere, give us some opportunity to use the gym floor? And it would not really happen unless we went back 2 or 3 times. The reason we raise this issue is because now the girls are practicing in the cafeteria. And so that is a concrete floor, and on top of that is flooring material. There's not a lot of spring. And it's a small compact. In the way it's set up, they still can't do all of their entire routine and practice it appropriately. As a result, some of the girls have had complained of back pain, joint pain, because they're dancing and they're jumping and they're springing and they're slipping on a floor that is not appropriate for their needs to practice. The school has tried to make an accommodation in the sense that they purchased some matting that absorbs about 35%, my understanding, of the force that is put upon it. Some members of our parent group have reached out to the manufacturer of that material and found that it isn't really suited for the purpose that our girls are using it, which is to be on it 7.5 to 12 hours per week. Thank you. So, because we want the girls to have the best competitive advantages possible when competing, we want the girls to utilize their dance skills as best they can without risk of injury. We would ask for the board's assistance in helping us find a way to get the girls either onto the gym floor or some other space in the school which would be more appropriate for what it is they're training to do. Or alternatively, if there is no opportunity to do that at the school, then to assist us in providing them a place to practice off-site at a dance school very near the school for the purpose of working on the routines to the best of their abilities without the risk of injury. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item of business is the public hearing on the 2018-2019 budget. The suggested motion is that the public hearing on the 2018-2019 budget of Township High School District 211 is now open.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone in the audience who didn't have the opportunity to sign the blue sheet to speak about this, would like to address the Board of Education? Seeing none. The second suggested motion is that the public hearing on the 2018-2019 budget of Township High School District 211 is now closed.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item of business is our presentation on the Student Readiness Plan. Dr. Cates?
We're very pleased to have with us tonight a presentation from some people closely involved with the delivery, creation of the Student Readiness Plan. We've been sharing information with you over the past several months. This really provides an excellent communication tool between students and parents, but also then among our staff members as well, to help ensure that people are aware of the students' plans, aspirations, and progress toward those objectives. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Mr. Kovac here to get us started, and we'll have an opportunity for some questions at the end. Mr. Kovac.
Thank you, Dr. Cates. But tonight is a great night. We've been looking forward to this for some time, and so we're excited to share with you the most up-to-date information about the Student Readiness Plan. As Dr. Cates shared just a moment ago, it's something that we have spoken about before. Tonight I am joined by representatives from each of our high schools to help me tell that story. From left to right, we have Beth Rosner, the Wellness Department Chair at Hoffman Estates, Jen Kraus, the English Department Chair at Palatine, Antoinette Minetti, a school counselor at Fremd, Eric Melton, Guidance Department Chair at Schaumburg, and Paula Hill, Guidance Department Chair at Conant. I think it's important to start with the why. You know, why did we create the Student Readiness Plan? You know, in prior presentations, you've heard all about our vision and its use by students, but tonight we want to talk about the plan's design and the features as they were constructed so that we can draw attention to the most important thing. That's the fact that we know that our students have unlimited choices about what they're going to do with their futures. And rather than being overwhelmed by those choices, we want students to use the readiness plan to help them narrow down their options based on real learning and experiences. We want students to make informed decisions about their futures. We want them to be ready for the day after they accept their diploma. In its beginnings, the readiness plan was an idea. You see, this is not a product we bought off the shelf or picked off of catalog page number 60. It's custom designed exclusively for District 211. And its plan, its design, its function was based upon real input from a variety of stakeholders within the borders of our district. They included residents who attended our community engagement sessions during the 16-17 school year, parents who shared their priorities about their children's futures, teachers who provided details about the skills they emphasize in their classrooms, local business leaders who told us about the traits they look for in job applicants, and most importantly, the students themselves, who told us about the kinds of experiences that they find most helpful. The combined input helped us to formulate the key components of the student readiness plan. And on this next image, you can see the 5 key components that we identified. This is the result of the input from each one of those stakeholder groups. And each one of these 5 components is interconnected to create a comprehensive package of readiness so that students can check their status against established benchmarks, set individualized goals, expand their awareness of specific topics, and document their own progress over time as they prepare for life as young, independent adults. In just the span of a couple of minutes, I gave you a history of the readiness plan's inception, but the reality, as you can see here, is that it's been a long journey. All the way back to 16-17, you can see over time the different project phases and the different pieces of the puzzle that all came together to just a few weeks ago, late last month, when we actually launched our live site with all of our students and all of our parents, a day that we had been looking forward to for quite some time. I would be remiss if I didn't make mention of the Joyce Foundation and their support of this project. They have generously funded 100% of this project from beginning until today and continue to stand with us shoulder to shoulder through our journey, and we're very appreciative of that.
When this subcommittee met to develop the branding for the student readiness plan, our consultant challenged us to begin by answering the question of why. Instead of focusing on what the readiness plan does or who it was designed for, she challenged us to identify our purpose in developing the plan. This process crystallized our intent, which was to guide students on their path towards success after high school. This then helped us to determine our tagline, GPS to Success, which you can see up on the screens, and our logo of a location pin on a pathway marking a destination.
Another rewarding outcome of the branding process was that we were able to hear students and parents talk about what the plan could actually mean to them. You can see some student-driven statements on this slide that were a direct result of that process. As we moved from creation to branding to implementation, we identified August 30th as the date that we would officially launch the readiness plan with students and parents. That day, students had the opportunity to watch videos introducing the plan and also logged into the plan and had the opportunity to explore for themselves. Later that evening, at each of the open houses, parents had the opportunity to hear from counselors and ask questions about the readiness plan. Parent engagement with the readiness plan will continue in the form of community engagement sessions in the upcoming month hosted at each of the high schools, and students and parents will hear more about the plan as the year goes on. Students will also engage directly with the plan through the group guidance program at each high school and through different courses in their school day.
On this slide, you will see a variety of topics that we cover throughout our group guidance programming. Throughout the last 2 years, we have completed summer curriculum projects that have provided curriculum alignment across all of our high schools. This particular example is some of the topics that we cover with our freshmen in the fall sessions, in the winter, and in the spring. Some of those may be combined sessions or combined topics within a session, and we'll be working very closely with our freshman wellness program in order to enhance that. This is an example of our junior activities, and these have been aligned as well. So freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, all of the activities have been aligned. So if a student is attending Conant High School, they will be hearing the same information as if they were attending Palatine High School. Throughout these lessons, many of the goals that are included within the student readiness plan will be completed. So in collaboration, again, with our wellness department, Counselors, psychologists, social workers will all be presenting material to students and completing that student readiness plan.
So as we mentioned to you earlier, our students began using the readiness plan in late August. We'd like to take you now inside of the plan to showcase some of the key features and describe how students will use the tool throughout their high school experience. I just wanted to make a note of one thing that I find very, invigorating. That center image is, these are our students. These are our students looking at the readiness plan on their iPads, and that center image shows a student who's actually on a piece of exercise equipment and using the readiness plan while engaged in physical activity. And it's just kind of, I had to point that out.
One of the great features of the readiness plan is that it's really a one-stop shop for students to access resources, to set goals, and also to identify links to helpful tools that they might use throughout their school year. If you notice on the menu, on the top menu, there's a user guide. Students can click there, parents can click there to find out more about the plan, and also for them to be able to watch video tutorials about each of the goal areas. There's also a counselor meeting button, so students can now make an appointment for their counselor just by clicking a button in the readiness plan. There's direct links to a calendar as well as their student email accounts. As you look on the left side, students can access their in-progress grades, see a history of goals over the years that they've set and met, and also a to-do list that can help to organize their day. Below that, there's links to Infinite Campus, Schoology, Career Cruising, and the District 211 Majors and Career Clusters website. We hope that with all of this in one place, when students log into the plan, they'll find it to become an integral part of their school year experience over the course of time.
So last year, Eric and I had the privilege of presenting the first three components to you: the academic component, the college and career exploration component, as well as the involvement component. So we thought we'd just refresh your memory a little bit today about each of those components, and then you'll hear more about our last two components at the end. So this is just an example of two of the goals that are covered under academic. The Power of 15, which is our goal to have students graduating from high school with at least 15 college credits, saving families time and students money, or the other way around, families money and students time in college. This screenshot is a live student, and this particular student, as you see, she has set a goal. The goal is the green bar, and students set that by clicking Edit This Goal. So her goal is to have 20 credits when she graduates from high school, and she already has 18. So our district benchmark is 15, hence the Power of 15, and she's well on her way to achieving that. To the right of that just shows one of the small boxes at the that students will see at the bottom of the goals that show resources. When students click on, or parents click on, Read More, then another box, which is to the right of that, pops up, and it gives them some resources, some links to websites that they can visit to gain additional information, all on their own. Obviously, counselors are always available for them to make appointments and come and visit and talk a little bit more, but this gives them some information right at their fingertips. The one down below is the unweighted GPA, which, as you can see next to GPA, it does have an asterisk there. That means that that is one of the goals that will be fulfilling that goal completion with that circle. So this particular student has a goal of a 3.0 and is achieving that and exceeding that as well. And then grade point and grade point average. One interesting fact, the day that we did roll out the student readiness plan, one of our counselors was walking through the media center after the presentation, and there were students on their iPads looking at their GPAs. That is something that is definitely a high interest for our students. So.
The next component that we'll be reviewing is the college and career section. This section helps students with the exploration of career paths and college choices. Each year will include the three components that you see up on the screen: college majors and career clusters, career options, and post-high school destination lesson completed. In the career section, students can enter their career interest areas, but there is also a space that will automatically populate from their career cruising survey results. As counselors, parents and students meet with us each year craving to know this very information. What is important for my future, for college admissions, for military career, for entering the workforce? When students or parents ask me for advice, I always ask what the student's goal is for the future. This will matter in how I advise the student. Many times, the future is uncertain, and that is okay. So students need to explore career and college interests along with what it takes to reach those goals. And the readiness plan lets them know what is important. This is also for families that maybe don't know what questions to ask. As a first-generation student, this would have helped my family. This makes me think of a student that graduated 2 years ago that was in my office starting on the first day of her freshman year. She was asking these very questions. She had moved here from India 7 years prior, and she wanted to make sure she was doing everything she needed to in high school to secure a successful future. She would have used this tool on a daily basis. And watching my students work in their readiness plans today lets me know that a valuable tool is in their hands. The college and career exploration component will also vary from year to year in what features it has from freshman to senior year. So up on the screen now are some components that our sophomores will see. This includes space for students to enter their career track experiences, which are field trips to explore various career areas. There's also space to enter post-high school options that they are exploring as well. The next screen will include options that will appear for juniors. There's a place to mark their attendance at college night as well as to record internship options. And then finally, they are also able to track their progress for the Harper Promise Scholarship in this section too. The readiness plan will track their attendance, GPA, credits, and community service hours in connection with the Harper Promise requirements. Since Harper Promise requirements shift from year to year, this is an easy way to keep track and know one's status. Parents and students like to have this information readily available to help keep them on track.
As adults and educators, we know that student involvement, both in school and in the community, is essential for life after high school. That's why one of the goals is student involvement. And the goal is to have students involved in at least 2 activities, including 1 activity or sport in the high school. Unlike other goal areas, the student involvement goal area does not change over time. Students can look at their progress through the right side of the menu, which allows for an automatic feed from Infinite Campus and displays all the activities and sports that students are currently involved in. To plan for future involvement, they can click on one of the boxes on the left under My Interests, and they can select from all of the activities and all the sports that are available to them in their school. As you go down the page, the community involvement portion allows students to document their involvement in community over the course of their high school experience, which will make it a lot easier when they're filling out college applications or applying for jobs in the future.
The global competitive skill portion of the student readiness plan grew out of meetings that brought area business leaders in to talk with District 211 teachers. No matter what the business field or area of industry, all of these professionals echoed one common concern, and that's that many young adults just entering the workforce lacked proficiency in what they called soft skills, such as interpersonal communication or punctuality, ethical decision-making. As a result, teachers from across the district, myself included, came together to further identify these areas and then developed a list of 5 global competitive skills. They're called that because proficiency within them can lead a person towards success in a wide range of options in either higher education or careers. As you can see on the slide now, the 5 skill areas are character, collaboration, communication, work ethic, and technology competencies. The Global Competitive Skills Committee then created statements for each of these 5 skill areas in student-friendly language. Each statement describes a desired behavior related to each skill. So, for example, the global competitive skill of work ethic includes statements such as, I produce quality work, I am consistently on time, and I am flexible with change. Of all 5 portions of the Student Readiness Plan, the Global Competitive Skills section is unique in that it doesn't draw information from other sources, such as Infinite Campus or FitnessGram, which you'll hear about in a little bit. Instead, this section of the plan is completed solely through student input. Students can do this by opening the Global Competitive Skill portion of the website, choosing one of the 5 skill areas, and then completing what we're calling an assessment, as it is designed to allow students the opportunity to self-assess their skills. These assessments allow students to identify an activity that they completed and then rate themselves on the I statements that relate to that particular area. They can select yes, they can select sometimes, or no for each statement. So here on the screen, you see an example of what one of those entries might look like. And I thought that for an example, I would tell you about my daughter, Emily, who's a senior right now with me at Palatine High School. She is serving as the president of Service Club this year. Each time that she leads one of that group's bi-monthly meetings, she could create an assessment in communications, for example. She could enter the date of the meeting as the activity and then self-assess how well she used appropriate volume, effectively explained a process or a problem, or made appropriate eye contact. Like Emily, all students can enter information on their own after completing activities in a class or an extracurricular group, but teachers can also guide a group of students through entering an assessment when their whole class or their whole sport or their whole activity participates in an event that could relate to one of these 5 global competitive skills. So going back to that example with Emily in the service club, when the club competes maybe like a whole group activity together, one of her sponsors could then lead the whole club through an assessment on collaboration. After entering the name of the opportunity, students can rate themselves on how well they accepted their given roles, showed flexibility, and effectively handled positive and negative feedback. Teachers, counselors, and even discipline administrators might also encourage students to complete a global competitive skill assessment after students experience challenging situations as well. I'm not going to be talking about my daughter Emily for this one. An administrator who, for example, repeatedly sees a student for misusing technology during class time might ask the student to complete an assessment in that technology competencies area, maybe even during the discipline conference. Not to point out the student's weaknesses per se, but maybe to facilitate a conversation about good choices and how developing habits now, good habits now, can lead to success after they leave high school. Just like the other sections of the Student Readiness Plan, multiple online resources for each of the 5 global competitive skill areas are available to teachers, parents, students, and counselors. These resources were chosen for the additional insight that they might give to the skill areas, or just to be able to give students different ideas on how to develop these skills or maybe how to track them. And to access these, all a student would have to do was click on one of the blue Read More buttons.
And finally, wellness. And it's such a broad topic and it means so many different things to so many people, but we've narrowed it down to 6 things within this category. Attendance, you'll find attendance under here, school connections, suicide prevention, and the next 3 slides that I'm about to show you will sum up the last 3. One that we value very much as teachers and administrators and anybody within inside the building is that each student has a trusted adult. Freshman through junior year, we ask that they identify 2 trusted adults within the school building and 1 outside the school building, and it can be anybody. And then senior year, we ask they identify 1 trusted adult within the building and then 2 out in the community, whether it be through church, work, home, whichever they choose, just to transition them out of life after high school. We did this activity in my wellness class last week, so we were 5 weeks in, and I said, you kind of know some people now, you know some adults within the building. I would like you to identify somebody you think you can trust. You can change it, but let's try to put somebody in there. And this one girl came up to me afterwards. She's very tense, and she said, will you be my trusted adult? And I said, absolutely. And she went, oh, I have so much to tell you. So right then and there, this student, as a freshman girl, probably scared 5 weeks in, felt safe, valued, and welcomed to be in our schools. So it was a pretty cool thing. The next thing we move on to is a personal wellness assessment. Now, I'm going to ask you, as board members, to say yes or no to the following 4 questions. Do you frequently participate in moderate to vigorous exercise 3 to 5 times per week? Yes. Don't answer.
Oh, we have a positive answer.
I know you do. It doesn't have to be public knowledge. You can keep it inside. Do you regularly get 8 to 10 hours of restful sleep? Do you find that you have enough energy for your day and extracurricular activities? And do you eat a well-balanced diet? You would be surprised. We did this the other day in my wellness class and my junior senior class, and you would be surprised the no's that come out of here. As I was looking at them, I was shocked. So our instruction is guided to help them understand the importance of this and to be well, to do well. That is our prime concept within this whole thing. And then hopefully that will help the other categories increase as well. And then the last thing that we have is the fitness gram. A fitness gram is a fitness test, and it measures aerobic capacity, muscular strength, muscular endurance, and flexibility. We'll give this on an average from 4 to 6 times a year. We'll enter the data into FitnessGram, and it'll be uploaded from FitnessGram to American Eagle, and the students will be able to see and track their progress. My goal, they can edit this goal, so when they get their new score in, they can push that down a little bit further to try to reach a healthy fitness zone. And on this slide, or on this screen, eventually they will see what the healthy fitness zone is. It'll be labeled in a black, I believe that's black or navy blue lines. So eventually by post-test, that's where they want to be. So all these components just encompasses a very holistic, well child that hopefully we can produce for the future.
So in the span of just 20 minutes or so, it's impossible for us to tell you everything there is to know about the Student Readiness Plan. But I do offer this invitation. Starting on Tuesday next week at Fremd High School, we will be hosting a community education session devoted exclusively to this topic. If the session at Fremd does not work for you, there are 4 more to choose from. And we just encourage you to consider taking advantage of that the same way we will all of our parents. This represents just a monumental opportunity for our students. It's an opportunity for them to take personal ownership over their preparation and planning for life after high school. And we know that the activities they will complete and the goals they will set will help them to be confident and assured as they take their next steps. Quite frankly, they will be ready as a result. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Klimkowitz.
I thank you. I think this is absolutely marvelous. I loved when we rolled it out, and I'm just truly, truly impressed with it because it covers just so much. You know, giving the kids ownership and direction in life, it truly makes a difference to help them now so they can set goals for themselves and you know, for housing and financial and relationship. All those things are just really important down the road. The growth mindset, I think, is just really important, what you're developing. Social emotional is extremely important, and the web of support. I really like how we've done that. I think that's absolutely terrific. And we saw some very high achieving students today. But what do we do for our student that is not as motivated? How do we make sure that they're participating in this?
Well, the participation is primarily driven, as you recall the mention of the guidance program, that they work together. So there are going to be lessons and activities that students take part in that will drive them to account for that action within the plan. And so it is a step-by-step symbiotic relationship between the two that all of our students who take part in that will document their progress. This is a tool that was created for the masses, right? There are always some extremes on both sides. You know, we met a few this evening on the one end, right? If we didn't have this, and we haven't had it, and yet they achieved, right? They will continue to do so because that's just who they are. But our intention here is to reach the critical mass, and then through analysis of completion and other data within the plan, we can more clearly pinpoint our specific efforts to students that need extra attention in a much more efficient manner than we could before.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think it was this presentation. I know it was maybe the prior one. How many touch points again with the students? I know we talked about touch points within the system to
Perhaps
making
you
sure.
could, go back to the slide with the freshman experience, just as an example. I think that's what you're asking about.
Right, I just couldn't recall the touch points.
So that's an example of a ninth grade experience of guaranteed, never fail time with a counselor. And these are just those activities that are connected to the readiness plan, not other items.
Correct. No, I was relating just to the readiness plan. We've been a month and some change into it. Any outside feedback besides the two right here, just off the cuff, that you've had experience with students?
Yeah, I can share with our freshman VAMP program. We basically have made it a goal of our PLT to touch base back with the readiness plan each time we're delivering a lesson or activity with our students. So we try to open our activity with it, so they're using it as that hub that we're trying to get them to use it as, and then touching base with something within there. So for instance, today's activity, we had them go in there, made sure that they had to put in a trusted adult, and also to put a completion date for our suicide prevention activity. So that's just one example of how we're using it with our freshmen.
Thank you.
We've also noticed we started to get requests through the counselor meeting request button, so that tells us right there that students are accessing the plan and choosing to request appointments that way.
Great, thank you.
Now, I know we're all on the board, and we've been exposed to this a few times, but I gotta think, if I'm in school, I can't help but think that they're getting exposed to it an immense amount greater than we are. I did have the opportunity to hear you at the Fremd Open House, and it was wonderful, very well attended, and an exposure for not only the students, but their parents. Gosh, I wish my kids had this when they were in 211, and I wish I had it when I was going through high school, just to help direct them. This is just, to me, this is just another way of 211 really standing out with the different programs that we have available for our students, not only as a provider of education, but the outcome of our students and the great students that we're able to have move forward from 211 and contribute in many different ways. So I'm extremely proud, and you guys have done an outstanding job.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions also. I guess first, the 8 to 10 hours of sleep, is that all in one day?
I know you guys don't get it, and I don't think the kids do either. I know it's hard to achieve, I know.
The second question, though, the serious question, is about the global competitive skills. I know you said, obviously there's soft skills, so it's hard to make quantitative measure of progress on those, and especially when a lot of it is self-assessment, even when it's faculty-led self-assessment. But how are you trying to make improvements? Because I feel like the student can say, I struggle with this, or the student may say, I'm fine with this, but you as the teacher might say, no, you're struggling with this. How are you incorporating those things into other areas of the day for the student to build those skills?
I see some rich conversations happening around that. Certainly kids can put in their own assessments, but I think where it becomes very valuable is in those situations that you mentioned, where perhaps a student is challenged to not just complete it, but to truly reflect and enter honestly. So the discipline conference example that I mentioned, I think it just provides a platform for a conversation and some common language, and by identifying some skill statements, I see that those conversations happening, and because of the statements in there, it being a better conversation at the end.
So then, even after the skills are identified, the areas for improvement are identified, how do you provide the opportunity to practice or to develop some of those skills? Because they're not curriculum based necessarily.
I would say, if I can speak to that, I would say that when they met with the outside CEOs and businesses to say what we are in need of, that was all brought back to our schools. And it's been a topic of conversation within our leadership teams, and which is funneling down to the department to build a instructional style to start incorporating some of these things with, you know, the perseverance, the persistent, the grit, the get creative thinking, making them think on their own, letting them lead the discussion instead of the teacher. I think it's kind of guided instruction a little bit differently within our schools as far as that goes. It's just in the conversations
Sure.
I've had when
We've also incorporated the opportunity for teachers to give direct feedback about these skill areas. You may be familiar with our in-progress grade reports at the 6 and 12-week mark. Those teacher comments are aligned to each one of the 5 skill areas, and there is a set that is considered a positive remark and a set that is considered an area for growth. And so based upon that direct feedback, the teachers have the opportunity to share their viewpoint of a student's status and or progress over time, which can help to fuel the student's own understanding in a stronger way.
Thank you.
And I would say, too, when we notice that a student might be struggling academically or behaviorally, and we have them in our office, and we can look at those progress reports, and we can look at maybe what they've done as far as assessments, or maybe they haven't done any assessments, we can ask them to, you know, pull out their student readiness plan and just kind of self-evaluate and see how they're doing, and then have that conversation and ask the student, what can they do? What do they think they can do? Rather than us always directing, but asking them, how do you think you can improve in this area? So.
Okay. Thank you. I really like the notion that these sort of mindsets and ideas and concepts are making their way into the classroom. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we know how to clear. Okay, this will bring us to our consent agenda. The suggested motion is that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre? Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. This brings us to our special reports. First, we have our Freedom of Information Act requests. This is for your information. Any questions? We also have been provided our report on the new professional staff. Questions or comments? Our 6-day enrollment report. Questions, comments? We also have our class size committee report. Questions or comments? And lastly, we have our salary compensation report. Questions or comments? All right, this brings us to our unfinished business. Resolution authorizing the adoption of the 2018-2019 budget. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as presented to establish the fiscal year of the school district to begin July 1, 2018 and end June 30th, 2019, and that the budget as presented for the fiscal year 2018-2019 be adopted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Nay.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Okay, which brings us to our new business. We have been provided information for the 2018 tax levy. Any questions or comments?
If I could offer just a thought, I wanted to express that we appreciate Lauren and Barb again presenting the chapters for us. At the upcoming Budget and Finance Committee meeting, we'll introduce some more of the general information contained therein, but the report does begin to introduce some of the primary concepts and ideas behind the levy. The chapters, again, are broken out to help anyone to understand more about the levy and how we work within the terminology. It is a special language many times, but I wanted to just express appreciation for that. And again, we're very pleased to help make those publicly accessible for people to follow along.
Thank you. We have our 10-year facility and capital improvement plan update. Any questions or comments?
I'm just going to add a comment to it. I think this is really important. I think our staff, maintenance especially, and leadership have just done a tremendous job of maintaining our buildings. They're in great condition. It's great for the students, it's great for the staff, and everyone involved. So I think they do a good job in gathering the information and doing the planning for it. So thank you.
Previous meetings, we've had inquiry or suggestion about how helpful it might be to have a course laid out for the projects, but then also to layer in some of the costs associated with those. While we don't have specific bid level costs, I think it was helpful to share information about the layering, if you would, of the capital fund allocation and projection at least, and then the same for the operations and maintenance, and then also for life safety. The life safety information, we are hopeful to bring that to you in an upcoming meeting here. And, again, we don't have that finalized, but based on the initial information that we're receiving, we think that those numbers and allocations will fit nicely and become a standard way of just operating within our operating funds. So that's really the intention, and I think the report lays it out nicely to organize it.
The only comment I would add on top of what Ms. Kumkowitz had said, it's nice to see these items identified, but some of these items have like a 10-year window. It's kind of hard to see where that impact might fall within the 10-year strategic plan if we don't know if it's going to be front-ended in the first 3 years or back-ended on the last 3 years. And in some cases, some of those items are identified to be completed between, like, I think it was 2017 to 2027. So that kind of window doesn't really provide any useful information, in my opinion.
That was the sort of the underlying foundation for the yearly allocation or projected amount. That helps then to gauge, how the projects would fit relative to a particular circumstance that might arise. But in general, the layering of those particular fund categories with those projected amounts, albeit general, does provide a framework for that. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, Lauren, to that.
Just to ensure clarity, the second chart that is included, or the final chart that's included in the report, does show, while it may be one single item that's spread in the initial information that's shared, for example, restroom renovations in a 10-year window of time, it does show the specific layering and how those will be completed over the several years, so that you can see individual years that we are targeting for the completion of those projects later on in the report. So I just want to ensure that that was clear.
Yeah, I saw that. That was the linear chart versus the vertical chart, which was on the front end, which had the,
Okay, thank you. Next, we have our resolution to include cash payments related to health insurance as Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund earnings. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approves the resolution to include cash payments related to health insurance as IMRF earnings as presented, and file the resolution with the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund.
so moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can you just give us a little bit more information about this? I guess I was a little surprised in regards to it. Maybe I should have known better, but, so the $1,000 is added annually, if somebody chooses to opt out of our insurance?
Yes.
Okay. And then it ends up being part of the amount that's compensated for retirement then, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So is it just the $1,000, or is there more involved in it? Like our cost for insurance or anything? It's just strictly the 1,000?
Yeah, just the 1,000. So the manner that we've handled this financially, the state has handled it financially, has been the same. All that's different now is this is a resolution to make sure that people are aware of it, to say that that is indeed going to be credited. we do have a couple examples. So this year, I think we had 33. Go through some of that
Sure.
detail.
This year we have 30 IMRF retirees, and of those, we have one individual who elected the cash out option that would have the $1,000 recorded as creditable earnings. The others had selected an insurance plan through the district.
So in terms of the projected amount, it's about $20 to $25 a month thereafter that it impacts. We've been very clearly guided by our insurance consultant that to continue to offer that incentive opts them out of our self-insurance program, and they strongly recommend that we continue that.
Okay, so once they opt out, can they come back into our insurance?
There's
Yes, it is an annual election. And each year they have the opportunity to choose whether or not they choose the district's insurance plan.
Okay, and unless I'm reading this wrong, the elected opt-out of the insurance, we've got 110 IMRF employees.
For the current year, that is correct.
For the current year, okay. Okay, thank you.
So my understanding is there's no change in the way that we're currently operating. It's simply making a resolution as per new requirement.
That's exactly right.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre, Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. We have our proposed policy revision for medication administration in schools. This is our first read. Any questions or comments? Okay. Next item of business is our Board of Education communication. We've been given some information on this.
I guess I have a question. I know back in, February or March, we had some discussion about board communication. So I just kind of wanted to understand what precipitated this back on the agenda.
Sure. There was a recent string of messages, exchanges, I think, that have been the precipitant for it. And I have spoken with numerous board meetings about it. And I believe, certainly unintended, but what had happened was, as a result of a contact trying to clarify, it did lead to a complication. It led to, I think, a compromise in the administration's ability to work with parents. And I think it was potentially or already did lead to then some confusion for parents. And I wanted to just provide information so that the board had an awareness of the information behind the topic, but I think overall more just to clarify that our administrators' ability to deal directly with parents and to work through matters of operation is critical for us to maintain. And if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate that, we would certainly like to do so. And then also possibly at the board level, if there's any requalification or reclarification, reminder, I'm not sure what would be helpful, but to help just solidify that. And again, I do think that it can compromise the administration and then complicate our work, but then also I do think it can lead to confusion among parents. And so the overall hope here is really just to benefit all parties we're all working hard toward the same direction, and how can we best do that?
I guess where I draw a little bit of concern is that I believe our conversation was in January. It could have been in that timeline around communication. And I guess I want to ask, as a board, where have we fallen short on our own line of communication and understanding amongst ourselves to go ahead and move forward with this, so that we don't continuously, stumble on this, whether on purpose or not. We're here to manage and govern the district, but we, definitely have some limitations, and we should have some boundaries amongst ourselves. So I'm just curious where we've fallen short and where we can do better.
Well, first, I'd like to state that I don't think anything in our policies should prevent us from communicating with parents or students and engaging the community and explaining the policies that are in place. And I think that if a board member seeks to engage a group or a community member to facilitate and engage and direct them back to the administration, as we have agreed to, I don't see any harm in that. I think there is a potential that maybe the administration might be a little bit oversensitive when they're copying on some of the emails and may be reading more into things than maybe there. But whether we send an email directing them back to the administration or whether we meet with them face to face and provide that service as a knowledgeable board member to bring them back to the administration, I see no issue with that. And you may disagree, but that's my perspective.
Sure, absolutely. I actually don't disagree with communicating with our community. I do it quite frequently. Where I draw concern is when we, as board members, are a hindrance to the district doing business. That's where I get concerned. And I think in this stream of communications, there were multiple opportunities to contact and pull back, and that there was not really a need to redirect because I feel there was a blockage. There wasn't a need for that. The initial contact, completely agreed. I agree that we as board members do not have a policy about that, but we do have policies when it affects work, and that's where I'm struggling. And so I'm kind of looking for understanding. One, we didn't really answer my initial question, but second, since we're moving on to this piece of it, is along these lines of communication, I guess I'll just ask you frankly, at what point was there a need to redirect the administration back? When did the administration lose the direction?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you mean.
Well,
I was speaking about redirecting the people that had reached out to the administration, directing the community members back to engage the administration, not to hinder them, but to facilitate further communication.
Sure, and what I'm suggesting is that the reach out is what caused the need for redirection. The direction was already there. The administration was working, and the work stopped when the reach out happened.
So when the board receives correspondence from community, it's basically the board's policy to ignore that entirely?
No, you can simply acknowledge it, and if we're going to speak...
But that's the reach out that you're saying created the hindrance.
Sure, let me give you an example without divulging the content. Like an example would be, in a reach out, like that would be, dear Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, thank you very much for reaching out to the Board of Education. Your letter provided a lot of information, and within that communication, this is an operational matters, and I'm connecting you back to the superintendent if you have not already been connected, because that's the appropriate channels of that. That to me is acknowledging and keeping the operations where it belongs. And so no, you don't need to not communicate with the community, but again.
But when the initial correspondence says that they've exhausted options with the administration and they're reaching out to the board due to that exhaustion,
then I would have recommended to perhaps reach out to the administration to have further investigation and clarification and verification of what that claim may have been. If the intent was to redirect the community back to the administration, I would have thought maybe that was something that should have been done immediate. But in this particular instance, there were other things that became involved.
Sure.
And speaking along lines of communication, you know, when this kind of stuff gets out in front of us, administration has to reach out to the person who's sitting in the role of mine, whoever that might be. And so then part of my job is then to facilitate what really is the will of the board, if you will, on this item. And to my understanding that I have the right to facilitate those types of conversations one at a time. And I'm just curious, why you didn't return my calls. I'll just have to ask you that question, because I think a lot of this could have been, we could have been in front of it as a board, as we should have been, not individual board members, to really redirect or change direction or whatever we needed to do as a board, not as individuals.
So from my perspective, again, received communication from the community, was only looking to reach out in response to that communication. That was it.
I'm not,
So when you're calling and leaving me messages that you're doing informal polling or looking to do an informal poll, I'm not really, that wasn't part of the intent of the communication that I was having, or trying to have at least.
sure, and that's your individual board member intent, but when that action affects the entire board and we need to redirect and we need to hear from all board members, I think it is divisive and frankly just rude that you don't want to work the board or the business of the board, just your own agenda of what you want to do on that communication and not work it as a whole.
Okay, noted.
I'm going to add to this. I truly believe that any elected official, whether it's our board members, any other school board, trustees, whatever, we're problem solvers. You know, that's kind of our first thing that we want to do and take care of. But we have to step back and we have to remember that we're part of a board that cannot take any action unless the entire board agrees to it. And I think that's one of the most important things and sometimes very difficult thing to do is understand what's governance and what's operation. And maybe we need to go back and review our agreements periodically, quarterly, just to remind ourselves, because human nature is, you know, I want to solve it, I want to take care of it, I want to get everybody happy. But sometimes we can't do that and we've got to step back. That's why we've got the superintendent, and he's the one we hire and fire if he's not doing his job. So I think that that's really important. And I know we all agreed, because we spent a lot of time talking about this, that we allow our president to speak on our behalf if there's any type of issues. We ask that our president communicate with us if there's a pending item, and they reach out and they call us. We have to respond back. We should call back just to find out what's going on, what the situation is in regards to it, because I think that keeps us informed, and it has to go in both directions, where our president keeps us informed and we also have to keep our president informed. I know that there's boards that read these every month. I don't think we need to do that. They talk about certain things out of their board agreements, board objectives, purpose of the board. We probably don't need to do that, but I think a reminder of how important it is that we are working together, that there's unity. And if we have a problem, we need to direct it towards our superintendent and have him take care of it.
I'm not disagreeing. I mean, the intent was to redirect and only respond. I mean, how often do we hear that the board receives correspondence and it's silent and there's no response to that? I don't know if anybody else had reached out in response to that correspondence and acknowledged that they received it. I know that a lot of times I hear from the community. They send messages to us and it's deaf ears. And I think that is probably a lot more discouraging than most things.
And I think it's fine to, as Mrs.
Yeah.
Burke said, sending a note back saying,
Sure.
Thank you very much. Please direct your inquiry to the superintendent or the principal, and take it in that direction.
I think that's a really good point, and I mean, I certainly don't fault you for responding at all. But I think that, in the communication, we saw a point where the parent was no longer willing to communicate with the administrator when the administrator reached out. And I feel like that, and I'm not saying that, I don't know that you did anything that caused that up to that point, but I feel like that's a critical point, because I mean, I think that we have talked about, and I believe that, that that the administration within the building, that the classroom teachers ought to be, sort of the first line.
Completely
And
agree.
at the point where they've got the attention of a board member and are now no longer willing to talk to to the administrators in the building, I feel like that's a critical point.
Right, and the whole purpose of
And
the
I feel
core.
like that's a bad
Yeah.
place to be.
Well, I don't disagree, but throughout that, if you look at the correspondence, again, I've copied the superintendent on it. I didn't leave the administration out. I didn't go rogue here and try to not keep the administration informed and the superintendent. Obviously, all the emails he shared, he's gotten a copy on. I spoke to the superintendent directly. I said, my goal is to just facilitate a redirection back. At some point, the email was sent because they were frustrated with our administration and they felt that they weren't receiving relief, they weren't being heard. Part of our role and our oath is to go back to the community and reaffirm them that we're working in the best interest of our students. And to do that, I felt the best option was to reinforce with the community there that, hey, we're working on it. I asked questions to make sure that we're still open. It wasn't a final decision. I'm trying to make sure that I can put them back and reassure that, they've been heard. Please continue working with the administration. And I stopped that process when I got the concerned information that, that the administration isn't receiving direction as a whole from the board. I wasn't directing administration. I wasn't going there stating as an individual, hey, you have to, find relief for these people. So I think it's a little oversensitive there that, as a board member, my goal was to push them back as policy states to rectify their concerns. And I'm sorry that, other members may have felt that they had some additional emphasis. I clearly state I have no power as an individual.
You did, I would agree 110% that you followed those protocols. Where I think you fell short is that it was moving out, you say to redirect them back. They were never not directed. They were expressing their frustration. They were still talking to administration, working. When the stop happened was when your communication happened. And that was the moment that I think that you needed to take a step back and look at the whole situation as to, am I really working in the best interest of the district at this point? Or am I working in the best interest of a small group of people, which are an important part of our community, but as a whole, am I disrupting the business of the district? And that's all I'm suggesting. And I think when the communication, and it brings me back to my original question I had tonight, is what form of communications amongst each other will make these types of events not happen or minimize or limit? That's what and I'm not hearing that we're even close there yet, because I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing, I don't think I did anything, and you're being sensitive, and I note your agreement. So I still feel like we're not anywhere close to communicating, and so we're going to end up in this position again if we don't figure this out.
Well, I think that we have to have a policy that responds how the board responds to correspondence directed to the board. If it's a designated, hey, it's the president or whoever, somebody is responsible for responding to those correspondences and making sure that there is a response. If I know that somebody else is going to respond, I'm not going to reach out. But when there's no policy for a response for something like that, and it's just open to all the board members, do we have a delegated response process?
But I also think you should have notified somebody else on the board. You should have returned Messiah's calls. You should have at least talked to one other board member to say that this is what you were doing. I mean, the fact that, that one email said to the superintendent, well, we don't need to talk to you anymore. We got the ear of a board member. That really, you undercut the administration when you did that.
I didn't make that decision. Hindsight's 20/20.
No,
I mean, I'm not a mind reader. I can't
but
say
it's
if I reach out to a community member, they're going to respond this way. I mean, in my experience, most people are like, all right, where do we go from here? Not, all right, I'm done
How
with the
about something
process.
as simple as, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, we've had multiple communications, and now that I have a little bit more understanding that, this is an operational issue and it does need to be in the hands of the administration, I encourage you to speak to the administration until I can talk to the rest of my board if this is an issue that they want to do differently. Instead of deflecting the conversation, deflecting the blame, and then moving on, and from, if I'm not correct, from the last communication, not giving a response. From giving a whole bunch of responses to then no communication when she asks her final question. That's all I'm suggesting. I don't think, I still believe board members should be able to respond the way they want, but I think it requires some insight on your own onus of saying, am I operating as an individual? Am I operating as a board member? Do I have my own agenda here? Do I not have my own agenda? And ask those higher level questions before we just keep going down and down and down, and be respectful to your other board members and not, frankly, throw us all under the bus.
And quite frankly, when it's said that this board does not respond to outside inquiries and emails and communication, I think that there is a representative who does respond to the community when appropriate. If someone is simply making for lack of a better term, a derogatory comment addressing this board, then I question whether or not there should be a legitimate response from the board of those types of situations and comments. But when there is a question or a concern, there's a very capable individual named Dan Cates who does respond, I've seen it multiple times, to the community when there are concerns expressed to the school district. And in many ways, that's his responsibility to respond to those types of inquiries when there's a question about the operation of the school district. And he does a very, very good job of that. So if somebody is saying that this board is not responsive to outside comments or questions, I don't see that with regards to questions when they're deserving of a response. But if it's a question to perhaps inspire certain kinds of responses and not a progressive response where we can have successful interactions with individuals, then I see that that's when we don't respond. But we do respond when there's productive comments or questions being addressed to this board.
And maybe it's not a response. Maybe it's just an acknowledgement. And that's something too as well. I mean, again, I'm just relaying the information I get from community members that I interact with.
Sure. I just want to ask Dr. Case a clarifying question, because Mr. Dombrowski has said several times that this board is unresponsive, and we have a policy that when we communicate with the public that we CC the superintendent in. Do you get correspondence from other board members outside of Mr. Dombrowski commenting to the public when they send emails to the Board of Education or to individual board members separately?
I have gotten them, yes.
So it's fair to say that we're responsive, maybe not to the individuals that Mr. Dombrowski is speaking with, but that you have seen communication going out to the community from various board members.
Yes, it is not uncommon for a board member to send me a note with a message and to ask for a follow-up to it, and to do the check-in, and then I'll let people know, and I generally do that in an email to the whole board. I don't draw attention to the fact that who sent the message, but just generally do a follow-up to qualify that a person sent a message and this was my response, or how we intervened or solved it, hopefully. So that happens frequently, honestly, that someone will send me a message, and then I'll take, and typically we employ people from our schools who then respond and do it on the interaction level that is, in the line, if you will. And then I don't try to draw major attention to it, but just simply summarize it for the board in a later email.
I would like to add one more thing. I think the perception is important. And I think, how we perceive things we may have to step back and see how that community member perceives something also. And I really think that a lot of the public has no idea what the duties are of a board, or how what the difference is between governance and operations. So a part of our job, I think, is also to educate our community members in regards to that. So maybe we need to just step back and also make sure that if any situation, whatever it might be, how is it viewed from the other perspective? I think that would help us as we go forward.
Thank you. So I heard two things outside of the discussion that that Mr. Dombrowski has suggested that we need a policy, and I know we've talked about that, so I want to throw that back out at the table, that was brought up. In addition to Mrs. Klimkowitz brought up that maybe we need more board governance training. So I just want to bring both topics back out and get an opinion and a pulse of the board on both of those topics.
I would just like to see us, we've got the agreement of really following through on our agreement. We talked about this for hours and hours, a couple of times. So I think these are all common sense things. These are all ways a board needs to handle acting as a board and working in the best interest of all the stakeholders, all the shareholders that we have. So I still support these.
And that's enough. I don't think we need a policy.
Okay. Does everybody feel that, so I heard over here that we don't need a policy, that's enough, that everybody has enough tools to understand the governance document that we all adopted back in, I believe, 2016, for the second time? Does everyone have the tools to understand it and respect it and utilize it?
I disagree. I think that, this isn't an issue of directing operations or strategic planning by the board. This is just who communicates with the community and how that's done. That is, and that's not necessarily what our agreements were really about. We take an oath that basically states that we're going to, help anybody that wants to seek an audience with the board. That's part of our oath. We also put the students first, and we also make sure that in that policy, we state that we're going to make sure that our facilities are adequate and safe, and that we're going to prioritize the students. And when we follow through with that, and again, this is really just about who's communicating with who and how. And I don't see this as a operations strategic issue.
Well, okay. So
it's governance.
It's governance, but we agreed in January timeframe-ish that we could all respond to things as long as we did it in the appropriate manner and didn't hinder work. And in this case, that did not occur.
I don't believe my actions hindered the work. I think that maybe some misunderstanding by the community member as far as what the process might be moving forward may have created the hindrance. But again, I basically did not direct administration or anyone to make any operational changes on behalf of anything, and was really just offering to outreach and maybe convey our policy and how we proceed.
But it was an operational issue, though. I think it's part of the point.
And they conveyed in this letter that they've gone over the last 2 years through administration, and that they had been in contact with administration, and they conveyed that they were exhausted, and that's why they reached out to us in the first place, right? So in that case, it's unusual that somebody has already been engaged with administration for a long duration, and it's not their first time reaching out saying, how do I resolve this issue that I have? It's like, we have this issue.
Sure.
But as a board, our employee is Dr. Cates,
and we serve and we're elected by the community.
So to your point, you are we've established that communicating with the public and the community is not the issue. The question is that, did we hinder work as a Board of Education or a board member? Did we hinder the work And I think that's how we opened this discussion, but could we just hear it again?
Whether it was intentional or unintentional, I do not believe it was intentional, but I will say that when we have someone say to us that they don't want to work with the administration because they have an audience with a board member, that hinders us. And so whatever we can do to help safeguard that, I think that's really what we're looking for. But we have, and as I've shared in extensive information with you, just a lot of details about that. So the answer is yes, it did.
Thank you. Okay. So moving forward, I think if we're not going to work towards a policy, which I agree we don't need a policy, because I do feel this is something that we have control over our own actions regarding, and to just let Mr. DeMar, I've met with, I can't even tell you how many community members over the years that I've been on this board and before this board. So it's not I would have done anything different than you have done. Where I think I've done something differently is when I feel as if I'm crossing the line, I step back and I remove myself from the situation and I direct it to the appropriate place. Whether that place is Dr. Cates, whether it's back at this table, I don't keep going. And that's, I think, the difference. So if we're not going to work towards a policy, I think we need to just take a quick, do we have the ability as individuals to do that?
To work as a board together and communicate to one another.
And to just, and to, respect conversation and to agree to disagree, as we said in our agreements. And, again, I think we could have had this discussion earlier.
Potentially. And I, again, to clarify, when you called. Yeah, I mean, I had emails in there that said, we should meet with the administration. We should have administration there if we meet so that they can resolve the issues.
That's not your role. That's not your role. I think that's the piece we're missing here. When you're encouraging meetings between administration and setting up time, that's when it crosses the line. And that's when, that's the issue, is that I'm sure, it just doesn't seem like you recognize the difference. And we may have to agree to disagree because we've been on this topic for a long time. But I fundamentally think that that's the issue, that the lines were blurred and they weren't seen. And that's what I feel was not here. And I feel that you didn't help yourself along in the process by not communicating with the rest of the Board of Education, or at least one or more of us on the board, and or Dr. Cates.
The one thing I think should have happened was that you should have called Dr. Cates up and explained your concerns about this letter. And let him know, let him, or at least get an understanding what it is from the administration, that there was a problem from their end. The fact that you just responded didn't help the situation at all. I think if you had contacted Dan and then, made a decision at that point and find out where the administration stood on this whole thing, I think you would have been in a better position. You might not have responded.
I always welcome a phone call, so you could always call me.
Okay, so we're in agreement that we're going to continue to work on our communication. We are going to be forthcoming. We're going to keep the district and the students in mind, as we all do. And I know that you brought up several times that the students are our number one focus all the time, all of us. And I think it's fair to say that there's not one person at this table, probably in this room, who doesn't care about students in District 211, for sure. And we're going to continue with board governance along the way. And if anyone has any questions or needs any resources, I'm sure we can get those for you and help provide that support if it becomes an area of interest. Anything else? All right, thank you. This brings us to our board member expenses. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the pre-approval form for future expense reimbursement for Anna Klimkowitz to attend the Ed Red Kickoff Luncheon Meeting October 5th, 2018, North Cook Division Dinner Meeting Fall and Spring October 24th, 2018, and March 20th, 2019, and the Triple I Conference November 16th through 18th, 2018. Stephen Rosenblum to attend the North Cook Division Dinner Meeting October 24th, 2018. Lucia Burke to attend the North Cook Division Dinner Meeting Fall and Spring October 24th, 2018 and March 20th, 2019. And Edward Young to attend the Triple I Conference November 16th through 18th, 2018 as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever? Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Next, we have our potential topics for future discussion. Anybody have anything they want to share?
I'd like to request that for the November board meeting, that we have on the agenda a review and discussion around the resolutions that will be presented, discussed upon, and voted upon at the Triple I Conference.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, do we normally do, we normally do that, yes, and I think, and I'm messing my timeline up a little bit. Do we do it in October or November? Is November okay?
November's fine,
Does that
because we
work?
should-
Because we're early enough in the month.
Okay,
so.
I just want to make sure we have enough time.
Because we'll get the booklets and everything, and you've got the North Cook dinner coming up, and we'll talk about it a little bit there. So you'll get it, the booklets usually come out right around mid-October, and that has all of the information. Oh, we've got them already?
Yeah, they're in your packets
Okay.
upstairs, so.
Okay.
So we have them, so we'll have extra time and.
Okay,
It'll be my pleasure to represent this board at that meeting.
thank you. Any objection for adding that item on the October or November agenda? Okay, thank you. Mr. Dombrowski?
Yeah, just to follow up, I know that we had a public board discussion about the Cashier and Hoffman Estates, and I don't know if we need an agenda item, but just to make sure that we have the discussion that the recommendation from the state's attorneys change and whether or not we're in concurrence with that.
Do we want to have a discussion and/or an agenda item? What does everybody's be? I'm going to say right now, I think I don't have enough information to have a good discussion because we're still in no man's land. My position has not changed from the last time of what I want seen done, but I do recognize the fact that I do not have any jurisdiction. Me personally, and as a board, I thought our statement up front was pretty strong, and I'm assuming that's how we are still recommending our position, but at the end of the day, we don't get to make the decision.
No, I concur. I was just making sure that our community's aware that if the state's attorney makes a change, whether we concur or not with the state's attorney, that's all. And like you, I also agree with the first position we held.
So if it's okay with everybody, can we kind of put that on as we get more information and we think it's a good time to come to the agenda, we can do that? Or do we want to just keep bringing it up till we know more? Because we don't know more until they tell us more, unless you have an update.
Maybe just have it as a possible item on the agenda, depending on.
Well, if our position isn't going to change regardless of the state's attorney, then we just make that statement, we're done, we don't have to revisit it.
We have to, but
That's all.
But we've already made the statement. So, and we're not changing the statement that I know of. And so, are we just we're just reiterating same work over and over again? And
Well, I didn't know if basically on the state's attorney information, if anybody's position would change, or if the majority of the board would have changed based on the state's attorney's change in position. That's all. That was the part where we didn't. It wasn't when we made that statement. It wasn't a contingent statement. And I just want to verify that it's not a contingent statement. That's all.
What I can fill you in on is that I do believe that the next board meeting is the same day as the next potential hearing, as that was conveyed to me. So those days can change, but they are scheduled for the same day presently.
And if nobody's opinion would change based on the state's attorney's position, then we don't need to revisit this.
right, everybody okay with that? All right, thanks.
So I'm not totally clear, so do you all want?
We're not revisiting.
We're not revisiting,
Because our
okay.
position hasn't changed.
Right,
So-
no,
Very good.
no, the original statement, I don't
Yeah.
think any board members were contingent upon the state's attorney's recommendation.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, that brings us to our committee reports. We have NSSEO, Mrs. Klumpkowitz.
All right, in regards to NSSEO, this will be the 50th year.
Oh, wow.
And they will have a celebration, so it looks like November 4th, but we'll get some more information in regards to it. They had their opening day at sunrise, and their theme was No Wall Too Tall. So just being able to continue achieving. There were 430 staff that was there. That was their theme. They've done really well. They were appreciative of all of the people who came out for the transportation in-service collaboration. We had our staff and surrounding staff, 211. The bus drivers, it's really grown. They've had a lot more people participating in it. And they look forward to 211 sponsoring it, I guess, next year, because we didn't have room for it. So that was absolutely terrific. So they are doing well. They're going to have their safety fair was September 12th over at Kirk School, which is a really good event. They also talked about the transition services, where our students are from, and some of the services that are available, working on the transition action plan, their IEP, and again, students being involved in it, just as we had the readiness plan here. And the final item is the resurfacing of the track that's over at Kirk School, because it was originally put in thinking that that gravel walk would work, but it's really not working well enough for the wheelchairs and things. So the track is going to be resurfaced with, the asphalt or the running track surface, and they're beginning work in regards to that. So we've got a project and some construction phase and some compensation and going through the bidding process and so forth to get that taken care of, because it's a wonderful facility there, and this will make the access to it much better for them. So that's it from NSSEO.
Thank you. I know the Ed Red kickoffs in October. Is there any update anyway?
It's been no meetings.
Dr. Kate, do you have anything? Okay. Partners for Our Community, that was me. I was not able to attend on Monday. Mr. Kovac, hopefully you have an update for us.
I do have an update for you. I wasn't able to attend myself, but I can share with you that the first meeting of this school year took place on Monday afternoon. There's a couple of noteworthy highlights. First of all, the programming for the year is strong. The adult ESL classes have doubled from 2 nights a week to 4 nights a week, which just illustrates that continued area of need within our local community. The leadership training for women in the community is starting a new session. I know Mrs. Burke helped present to that group previously.
Thanks.
We also have a Asian Human Services continued involvement, and that is relatively new seat at the table, and is helping us to reach out to another segment of the community that deserves attention and support. Overall, the room was very crowded with 15 total partner agencies sitting there. One new group, Humanity Rising, which is a service-oriented group, was there to just make themselves available to be part of the combined effort. And I guess this can be a highlight or perhaps other, but the annual Trunk or Treat event is being reconsidered, given the numerous similar activities in the community. We're thinking that this group will likely partner with another agency and help out with their effort as opposed to adding one more.
Aw.
We have to go someplace else.
They're going to have to find a new spot for us for Trunk and Treat. We can find a new spot, Anna. Thank you. That brings us to our Facilities Committee. Mr. Young?
Yeah, well, the great news is the football fields over at Schaumburg and Frem are completed. And what makes it even more wonderful is both teams won their first home game there. And the track and everything is in excellent condition. The only two projects we have left are the Conan Fields and the Hoffman Estates Media Center. The problem we got with the Conan Fields is all the rain that we've had, so we're probably expecting the completion to be either late summer or fall of next year on that. The Media Center over at Hoffman should probably be completed by February or January or February. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And a little side note, I was talking to a community member today, and I was asked if Kona is getting an addition. So I said, no, just the fields are being redone. So that was a very funny comment. Okay, that brings us to our announcements. For your review, College Night is our upcoming on October 10th, and then, of course, our Board of Education meeting on the 18th. The next item of business is to enter closed session. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance of dismissal of specific employees, matter relating to an individual student, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, and probable and imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the public body.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Suggested motion that the Board of Education return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Wait,
In-
I'm sorry.
Peter.
Mr. Peter? Okay.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Administrative appointment, suggested motion that effective January 1, 2019, Ms. Sandra Muir be appointed as the accounting manager for District 211 at a gross salary of $85,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
And Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Discipline of a staff member, suggested motion that employee Catherine Gordon be suspended for 2 days without pay. Further, that the board secretary notify the said employee in writing of this action by the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Any meeting recap? Okay. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.